7, 8, 9, 10. Good afternoon. My name is Kazimir Kikelka. I'd like to welcome you all to our Macmillan Education Teacher Training Day. Today we have Josefina Ares, who will be presenting Has the Cat Got Your Tongue? I'd like to thank my colleagues at Mondadori Education who are helping us organize this day, and without them this would not be possible. Before I pass you over to Josefina, I would like to mention that you will be able to get your attestato di partecipazione. It will be available at www.mondadorieducation.it/attestati. So it should be up within a week's time, probably sooner, but might take a couple days to get it out there. So give it up to a week, and don't get worried if you don't see it, tomorrow or something. So Josefina will be discussing some of her teaching ideas with you. Josefina has been a teacher and a trainer for more than 20 years in Spain and in Italy too. She's worked for the British Council and International House. So without further ado, let me pass you over to Josefina. Thanks, Josefina.
Thank you, Casimir. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. I hope that you're all well and you're all trying to keep your spirits up high in this surreal situation that we all find ourselves in. I'd also like to say thank you to Macmillan and to Mondadori for inviting me today to do this. And today we're going to talk about setting up speaking activities in the classroom. So we're going to talk about what you need to think about before, during, and after doing speaking activities in your classroom and how to set them up. I'm going to start with by telling you exactly what we're going to do. I've kind of flipped what we usually do, which is to give you the theory first and then give you the practice. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to talk you through and also ask you to participate in a lesson which I did with my students, which was focused on getting them to speak. The lesson is called Digital Footprint, and that's what we're going to do first. Then I'm going to talk to you about what we need to think about when we do speaking activities in the classroom. So what we need to think about before doing them, during and after actually doing the speaking activity. Then we're looking at why do students sometimes not talk in English in the classroom? And the last thing that we'll look at are ideas to encourage students to speak in the classroom. So I'm going to start by actually teaching you the lesson that I taught my students. Some parts I'm going to just talk you through, and sometimes I'm going to get you to join in as well. Okay, so first I would begin the lesson with a game like this, which is a different version of Hangman. It's actually called Spaceman. And basically what happens is you get the students to give you a letter. If the letter is in your word, then you highlight the letter on the left-hand side and you put it in its place. And if it's not here, you highlight the letter and you press build, and this will build a spaceship. And basically the spaceship will fly if they don't guess the word. Okay, so it's an alternative to playing Hangman. You can download this app. I can't do it with you actually because it won't allow me to do it with you, but you can download it from this link that I've given you here, or just put Spaceman Hangman, alternative to Hangman, and you'll get it up. So, as you can see, my word is social media. So what I would then do is I would get the students to brainstorm words that they associate to social media. So let's see if any of you have any ideas. What words do you associate to social media? It could be apps, it could be verbs, it could be so any kind of feelings that social media it makes you think about. So have you got any ideas on what words associated to social media? Okay, somebody's come up with Facebook. Okay. Any other ideas? Any words that you associate to social media?
Somebody said fake news.
Okay, great. Fake news, great. Think about the adolescents and think about what the adolescents associate to social media. Well, actually, my adolescents come up with loads of words. And in fact, this is an example of the words that they came up with. Wi-Fi, spam, filters, stalkers, memes, Reddit, photos, etc., etc. To be honest, I didn't know some of that vocabulary because obviously they're there and it's something very up to date and something that they are very connected to. So they come up with lots of vocabulary. So I would get that vocabulary. If it's a face-to-face lesson, I would put that vocabulary on the whiteboard. If it's not a face-to-face lesson and you're doing this through something like Zoom, which some of you may know now, you can put it on the whiteboard as well. So you share the vocabulary that the students come up with. I prepared also a word cloud which has vocabulary which I thought was associated to social media. And what you could do is you can give this as a photocopy to the students and get them to look at that vocabulary and get them to look at which words they don't know. Most of them don't know what FOMO means. And what it actually means is fear of missing out, okay? Which is what adolescents feel when they are not connected to their phones or to their apps, okay? Okay, so once you've done that vocabulary and you've gone through that vocabulary, I gave them this to do, to look for in class. So you're working on vocabulary which is associated to social media. First, you're getting the vocabulary that they know already, which is probably more than we know. And then you're giving them extra vocabulary to do with the subject. If you see that you don't have time, you can give this to them for homework. Okay. Then I ask them, what does digital footprint mean? Okay. What does digital footprint mean? Now, does anybody know what digital footprint means? Have any of you got any idea? I'm just trying to see if I can see anything. Sorry, I've lost your line of chat. So, Casimir, is anyone putting down if they have any idea what digital footprint means?
Well, it seems like some people are typing in here just what your presence is online, your usernames and profiles and stuff like that. Okay,
great. Okay, so you elicit basically from the students what digital footprint means. And then you give them the definition, okay? And this is the definition that I have. All the information online about a person posted either by that person or by others, intentionally or unintentionally. So you show them this and you talk about it and you ask them to reflect on that. And you say to them, it's not just what you write online, but it's also what other people write online that makes your digital footprint. Okay. So then I go on to asking them, to telling them that they're going to see a digital footprint video. Okay. So they watch a digital footprint video. I tell them, you're going to watch a digital footprint video, and I'd like you to think about this question. What images do you think you're going to see? What images do you expect to see when you watch a video which is called digital footprint? So just think about that one moment and see if you can come up with any ideas as to what you can see, what you think you might see if you see a video called digital footprint.
So there's digital traceability, that's someone's comment.
Okay, but images, I'm thinking more about images. What images do you think? You're going to watch a video which is about digital footprint. What images do you expect to see in that video?
They're saying computers, mobiles, things like that.
Excellent. Okay, great. Yes, computers, mobiles, good. Okay, so I get the students, I elicit from the students 6 things that they think they might see in this video, and they write them down. Their next thing is they're going to watch the video and they're going to check that what they predicted is actually in the video. So the first time that they watch the video, they check that computer, mobile phone, etc., those images are in the video. So I'm just going to get you to watch the video one moment and see. And if you want to play along with me, you can make a note of some images that you expect to see in this video and see how many you get correct, okay? So I'm just going to let you see where I got that video from. It's called commonsense.org education/education. It's a great place which has videos to make kids aware of what they're doing on internet. I'm just going to go back to the presentation. Okay, so that's the video that they watch. I don't know if you got some of the images right, but obviously there was a computer in there and there was a mobile phone in there. I'm not going to do this with you, but with them, they watch it again. They watch the video again and they make a note of the images that they see. Okay. So before you get them to do this, let them jot down the images that they remember seeing. So some of them remember seeing images of a lighthouse, images of the world with footprints. If they remember, let them jot down the images that they can remember seeing, and then play the video again, and they make a note of the images that they see. And then you get feedback on that. And these should be some of the things that they come up with in their list. So here we have a computer, which is at the beginning. Then we saw a world with footprints all over it. Then we saw a lighthouse. Then we saw a copier. Then we saw a whisper in the ear, or people whispering in the ear. Then we saw a stadium, a flip chart, and a permanent marker. So those are some of the images that were in the video. And then I asked them a question. How are these images connected or related to the term digital footprint? Sorry, what have these images got to do with digital footprint? Why do we see them in the video? So give them a little bit of time to think about that, and they can jot down ideas. And then what I do is I go through each of the images, talking to them about what relation they have or what connection they have to a digital footprint. So for example, a computer, obviously the means through which we make a digital footprint. One of the ways in which we make a digital footprint is by posting stuff on Facebook, on Instagram, on WhatsApp, on websites, etc., etc. A world with footprints, what has that got to do with it? Well, that we leave tracks all over the world. Everything that we post on internet leaves a track, not just in your city, not just in your village, not just in your town, but all over the world. The lighthouse, they come up with ideas like it's searching. It might have to do with searching, with looking for people, because you might associate it to searching for information about someone on the internet. A copier, well, obviously that you can copy information and share it and distribute that information to as many people as you want. A whisper in the ear, that you can whisper from one person to another what somebody has said, something that you think is secret, but actually it's not that secret because it can go from one person to another. A stadium, the amount of people that it reaches. So a stadium is the amount of people that you can reach through WhatsApp, Facebook, TikTok, whatever kind of app it is that you use. A flip chart, well, that it's permanent. That if you write on a flip chart, it's not like a whiteboard, it's there forever. And again, a permanent marker is similar in that you cannot eliminate what you post. You cannot rub it from the internet. You can't take it away. So the students then talk about these questions. So I give them these questions on a piece of paper, either on a piece of paper or I dictate the questions to them, okay? Sometimes I dictate and then get them to check with either a PowerPoint presentation or on a digital board or by writing it on the whiteboard, okay? So these are the 4 questions that I dictate to them. 1, what kind of a digital footprint are you leaving? Do you share pictures of other people without permission? Do you make jokes in text, posts, or comments that are often misunderstood? Do you make negative comments about other people anywhere online? Do you post to try and create a perfect appearance? And if you do, why? Do you ever post or text something that you wouldn't say to someone's face? The second question would be, what impression are you leaving on the internet about yourself? So what you're trying to do is get them to reflect on what it is that they are doing on the internet. What kind of information are they writing on the internet? What things are they posting? Third question, which one of you is leaving a better impression on the internet? And how does it make you feel knowing that everything you do online is stored and can be searched, shared, or even broadcasted? So this activity is the speaking activity in the lesson. There are various ways to do this. You can either do it as a whole class, or obviously if you want students to get more speaking time, you can do it in pairs. So you can put the students in pairs and they talk about these questions between them, okay? So the idea of this is that they interview each other. And then you get feedback on this. Now, you'd be surprised at how much they actually talk about these questions. And you'd be surprised at having to say, okay, enough, guys, enough. No, but we just want to finish this last question because it's something that really interests them. And it's something that is real for them. And actually, lots of the classes that I've done this with say that I'm making them feel scared, because they start to really reflect on what it is they're doing on internet. Okay, so that would be the actual focus of the lesson. But then after that, you could take it a step further. And I've got two ideas for a step further here, but there are many more ideas that you can do. For example, tips for a positive digital footprint. So you can get the students to think about different tips for making a positive digital footprint. For example, be careful with the things you post. Don't post any personal information. Search your name. Think before you post. Make sure delete, don't forget to keep. So you can either give them a couple of examples and then just give them the prompts for them to fill in, or they can just think about it themselves. In this way, you give them a bit of guidance, and what they can come up with are posters similar to this, or, as I'll explain later, other things which they come up with because they are wizards with technology. Another, okay, this is another example. I wouldn't show them these examples though before they do something, okay? I wouldn't show them these examples because they'd just download them from internet and they wouldn't write anything, okay? And this is another example. You could get them to just think about the advice that they would give other teenagers in order to leave a positive digital footprint. So if I were you, you'd better, it's a good idea too. Why don't you? My recommendation would be, one idea is two, and I suggest. So you have here lots of different ways of giving advice, and you can ask them again to either create a poster or do other interesting things with them, which I'll talk about in a moment. This is an example of a poster type thing, 10 things to know about digital footprints, for example. Okay. So that's the lesson. That would be your language lesson, your speaking language lesson, okay? And these are just a few questions for you to think about, reflecting on that lesson, okay? Do you think this lesson would be interesting for your students? Would it work with any or all of your groups? Who do you think it would work with? How much speaking do you think this would generate, and why? How did the teacher generate interest in the topic? What should you do while the students are talking? And how could you take this lesson a step further? So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the different things that we need to take into account when we do speaking lessons. Hopefully you can take that idea that I've given you away and actually do that lesson with your students, that digital footprint lesson. But now I want us to think in general when we do speaking activities, the things that we need to think about. So before you do a speaking lesson, you need to think about trying to choose topics which are relevant or interesting to the students. Obviously, you can't do this every day in every lesson, but I think, for example, the digital footprint lesson will interest them and will motivate them to try and speak in English because it's a subject which relates a lot to them. Another thing we need to think about is leading into the topic and creating interest in the topic. One way to do that is by predicting what they are going to see, to read, or to listen to if it's a listening. Okay, so predicting, we did that in the digital lesson. They predicted the images that they thought they were going to see in the video about digital footprint. And then they saw, and their first time that they watched the video, they were watching to see if their predictions were correct. Another thing that you need to think about before doing speaking activities is giving them the necessary language. They need to have the necessary language, because if they don't have the language that they need to talk about the subject that you want them to talk about, it's impossible for them to talk about it. Luckily, in this lesson, most of them know how to talk about it because many of the terms are already in English. And as I said at the beginning, they come up with language that I didn't know, especially in this lesson, okay? Another thing that they need to think about is, you need to think about, sorry, before you do speaking lessons, are how to motivate them. And there are various things I've said here that you can use, either controversial statements, a photograph, or quotes. So these are different ways to motivate them and prepare them for the subject that you want them to talk about. And we'll look at some examples of those in a moment. Thinking time. Important to give the students thinking time. They need to formulate their own ideas. They need to make notes sometimes before talking to you. So for example, going back to the digital lesson, when we looked at the images, and I asked them a question, how are these images related to the digital footprint? You can't expect
Okay. Hello. I'm afraid that we've had a slight technical difficulty. Josefina had a mini blackout at her house, but everything is switched back on, so she'll be back with us in just a moment. So I do apologize for the inconvenience. This kind of thing definitely does not happen when we're doing this at your school, of course. So these are some of the risks associated with this. So sorry about that. I did notice a few questions that have been coming in during the conversation, and some of this had to do with like motivating students. One of the last things that Josefina mentioned before the line dropped, and it's something that I used to do as well when I was a teacher, was uh, you know you throw out something that is controversial, something that she had mentioned before. That will definitely wake them up a little bit. Get them to take an opposite position from what might be kind of socially acceptable. Not too much, of course, but especially nowadays, because one of the things that I think we've noticed is that teenagers tend to be very active, socially active, very concerned about the environment, very concerned about, kind of social problems. So, kind of throwing out those controversial topics is definitely a way to kind of draw their interest. So I would definitely agree with her on that one. Let's see here, a few other ones here. Can I do this lesson online? That was another question that I saw. Well, a couple things about that. First, we will be making these slides available at the end. We'll be putting it in the YouTube description. So you will be able to go and grab these. There will be activities and so on based on this discussion, and you'll be able to go and get those, and you will be able to do it online. I know a lot of teachers are now using Zoom. A couple of weeks ago, I think probably 80% of us didn't even know what it was, but it's now become kind of a lifeline. So with some of these activities, for sure, I think you could consider them to be ready-made lessons. So something that you could just, put on your screen, share, and get started. So that was another question that some of the teachers had asked. What age is the digital lesson for? That was one that came up a moment ago as well. I see this as being upper secondary. I know that we've got some middle school teachers participating today. I would say from upper secondary and even perhaps university. I don't see this as being younger than that. Middle school, for example. I think in most middle schools they may not really have the language to discuss these in any meaningful way. But you never know. Sometimes you get a really good group. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's see here. Another question that came up about using this in the present situation. Yes, I would say yes. You could adapt this. Going back to my first comment about speaking about something controversial, I think there's a million things that you could develop for that lesson with what's happening right now. So saying something controversial, like should we lift the quarantine, after Easter, or maybe we keep the quarantine until the end of the year to guarantee that that's the end of this, that's the end of the virus. So there's a whole variety of things that you could develop around the current situation with the lesson that she was showing. How would that relate to digital footprint? Well, I don't know. You'd probably have to be a bit more creative than me, honestly, in that particular case. I mean, I suppose the posts they're sharing and stuff, I imagine all of us students especially are sharing things right now. So maybe get them to bring in some of their posts about the current situation. Let's see here. Are there any other questions? Let's see. What age is the digital lesson for? So yeah, those are pretty much the main ones. If you do have questions, please just put them into the YouTube comment section, and I'll be able to have a look at them, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. Not as good as Josefina for sure, but
I'm here.
okay.
I'm here.
I think we're getting her back now. Think we're getting her back. So if you just hang on 1 second now, we'll bring her back. I can see her. I don't know if you can see her yet.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, great. I'm going to see if I can put my PowerPoint back on, everybody. I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened. There was just a blackout. But I'm back again with the help of my boys at home, because if it were up to me, I wouldn't be back. I am lucky enough to have two boys who know how to do this. So I'm just going to go to the presentation again. And actual. Great. Yay, we're here. Okay, guys, I'm really sorry about that. Out of my hands, I'm afraid. I hope you can see me properly. I hope that you can hear me properly. Okay, great. Let's go on, because I've got very little time left now. So I was talking about what you need to think about before you do a webinar, before you do speaking activities, okay? And these are some of the things that you need to think about. So this is one thing, giving them the vocabulary that they need. Another thing that you could do is working on that vocabulary. Now, there are loads of things online that you can download that are already done, like from ISL collectives, ESL printables, etc. So there are things that you can download which are done already. Another way to build their interest in the subject is through using quotes. So here we have 6 different quotes, and you could give them these quotes. What I did with these was to get them to read them and tell me which ones they liked best. Okay, so that's what I asked them to do. Also, another thing that you can do is show them images. So let them see images of what it is that you're going to do. So in this case, we did a digital footprint lesson. You would show them an image like this, which would get them thinking about the vocabulary that they need. During the speaking activity, you would look at different things, okay, different things to take into consideration when you actually do a speaking activity, okay? One of the things is use appropriate interaction. So some speaking activities lend themselves to doing it in pairs, some lend themselves to doing it in groups, and other activities lend themselves to doing it as a whole class, okay? In this case, some of the questions we threw out and we did as a whole class. But then the interview part, they did as in pairs. Now, if they do things in pairs, it gives them more talking time, obviously. The more that they do in pairs, the more talking time they have and less teacher talking time you do. Okay. Another thing to think about why they are doing the speaking activity is for you to keep a low profile. Don't butt in constantly when they are when they are speaking. You want them to try and speak as much as possible, okay? Be there, yes, prepared to give them ideas, language, if necessary, and if they don't know how to say something, give them the language that they need. Another idea is make a note of important errors, but also write down examples of good English, of expressions that they use which are good, okay? Another thing to think about is, if possible, change the classroom furniture so that the students can see each other. So if your class is in rows, it's very difficult to do speaking activities. So try and get them to look at each other, even just by turning their chair, or maybe getting the row in front to turn around and look at their partner behind. But eye contact is very important when you do speaking activities, okay? After doing it, well, you can get feedback on the discussion. In this case, it would be really interesting to get feedback on the discussion. Did the students agree? Did they find a solution? What was their conclusion about their speaking? Also, having a brief correction slot, including examples of good English, is a good idea as well. Careful with not picking up on all of their mistakes, because sometimes I think it stops them from talking, it stops them from fluency. So if you're focusing on fluency, you're focusing on fluency. If you're focusing on accuracy, it's a completely different thing, okay? Another thing afterwards is, does the activity lend itself to some kind of further work that you can do with it? So before, I said to you that you could do a poster giving tips on how to make a positive digital footprint, or you could give advice to other students and get them to give advice. Now, some of my students come up with great things, not boring posters, but some of them actually do small videos or quizzes. One of my students did a quiz about digital footprint and gave that quiz to the rest of the students. They are really fast on technology, so they come up with ideas that you would never think of. Last thing, getting them to produce an outcome is always motivating. A poster giving advice to other students, a role play, or a short video. So there are many things that you can do after doing a speaking activity to take it a step further, and using some of that vocabulary, some of that language that the students have used. Casimir, can you hear me? Can I just... Am I being heard?
Yes, absolutely. I can definitely hear you. Yeah,
Great.
I think
Okay.
yeah, the others can hear you too. So yeah, keep going, please. Thank you.
Great. Okay, I just want to check because my live webinar has gone down as well. Okay, so these are a few examples. These are a few examples of what you can do after you've done it. Posters, as I said. On the Common Sense website, there are billions of things that you can do. It's a very interesting website. I haven't looked at half of the stuff that they've got, but this is another thing that you could do. What kind of a digital footprint do you want to leave? And this asks about the type of digital footprint that you would like to leave. Here, I've written, for example, thinking about myself, if in 10 years' time somebody looked at my footprint, where I'd like to leave things like beautiful pictures, environmental awareness information, interesting articles, teacher training bits, political statements. Yes, I don't care. And clever things in general, okay? So they think about what kind of a digital footprint they would like to leave. Video ideas, guys, for further work on the digital footprint. Here I'm giving you 3 different videos that you can do with your students, okay, which are all connected to the digital footprint. One is called The Social Network. Another one is called Black Mirror. Probably Black Mirror is for an older crowd, upper secondary, because it's a bit strong and not. It depends. You have a look at it. Obviously, don't give them anything without you looking at it first and seeing if you think it's appropriate. But these are all very interesting videos which you could give to them as homework to do. Okay, some of them have worksheets to accompany them and others don't. Okay, watch the short videos or episodes, and they could make notes to tell the rest of the class. They could discuss the content. Did they like it or not? Just simply, did they like it or not? Or they could write a short review. So this is another thing that you could do to take that lesson, for example, a step further. So why do students sometimes not talk in English? These are some of the reasons why our students don't talk in English sometimes. One of them is the topic's not interesting. So if they're not interested in, I don't know, oil spillage, or I don't know, things that adolescents are not interested in, they're not going to talk about it. They have no reason. So if they don't have a reason, like getting information from the other person, then they're not going to talk about it. They know nothing about the topic. So if you ask them to talk about something that they know nothing about, they're not going to talk. The task was too vague. Maybe you need to think about when you give instructions, how you give instructions, checking the instructions, making sure they understand exactly what it is that you want them to do in the speaking task. They make lots of mistakes and feel embarrassed. So sometimes they're embarrassed because they make mistakes. And I think this is partly can be helped by the teacher by not being very judgmental when they make mistakes. They're learning, it's part of their learning process. They haven't got the language to do so. They don't have enough language, give it to them. They don't know what to do, make sure that you've checked the instructions. They haven't had time to think, give them time to think before you expect them to speak. First, and most important, be the prime example. You must use the language that you want them to produce. There's no use talking in Italian or in Spanish or in your mother tongue to the students and then expecting them to speak in English. You've got to be the prime example. You've got to speak in English to them. Otherwise, they're not going to. Another one, have a discussion about why it's important to use L2. So at the beginning of the year, having a discussion with them about why it is important for them to speak English in general may help. Make classroom language sentences. So you've all had or seen classroom language. I don't understand. What do you mean? How do you say? So make sure they've got that language as well if they need to ask you questions. Give them roles to hide behind. So if there are shy students that don't want to speak because they feel shy, well then give them a role to hide behind. Give them some kind of tell them you're Jane or you're Peter, and this is like role plays. Then remind them, insist and prompt them whenever necessary, and only respond to English. Okay, so remind them in English, in English. I'm sure we all do this 100 times a day. And start by using tighter controlled exercises and then move on to freer ones. Do I have time for the last slide?
Yeah, I think you have another minute or two, no problem.
Okay, last slide. Other extra ideas to encourage the students to speak in English. Make the classroom an English zone. The moment they cross the door, they are in an English-speaking world. Praise students when they use English, even when it isn't 100% correct. If they're using it, praise them. Negotiate when English must be used. Some kind of classroom contract stating when to use L1 and when to use L2. To be honest, I've never used this because I try and insist on them speaking in English in the lesson. But I have had some teachers who have said to me, well, sometimes what I do is I allow them to speak in Italian when they're not doing the actual speaking activity, but then I insist that they speak in English when they do the speaking activity. A bit, I don't know. Careful with that one, I would say. Make sure the activities are pitched at the right level. Don't expect too much if they don't have the level. Make them aware of how little time they speak English in comparison to how much time they speak Spanish or Italian, okay? And lastly, bribery. There are many different systems for bribing them into speaking English. Okay, so that's not really, that's just to finish on a funny note, okay? But, well, some teachers do bribe them. Extra homework, for example. Okay, guys. Well, I'm sorry about that interruption, and I'm so glad that I could get back and finish that presentation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking part. I'm passing over to Casimir for the moment.
Okay, cool. So yeah, thanks, Josefina. I'm curious to know what form of bribery is your favorite with your students?
Well, probably the extra homework one is probably my favorite.
Okay, that sounds more like, I'm not sure that's quite bribery, but okay. But sounds more like a punishment to me. But
Yes, well, probably.
so I've already fielded a few questions from our audience. So if there are any more questions, they can add them to the chat box below. But in the final 2 minutes, I would just like to mention a few kind of technical details, so to speak. The first is that you've prepared some downloadables for the teachers who are attending this live streaming, and they will be made available on Mondadori's YouTube stream. This one, in fact, under the description. So if teachers click there, they'll be able to access these materials. One of the questions that did come up was whether or not they would be able to use this online. And I said that with the materials that you're going to provide them, they would be able to use that, maybe with a few minor modifications.
Okay, so what I've included for them to download is a lesson plan of the digital lesson. So in a Word, probably they will receive it or in Word or PDF. So what they do is copy and paste and change and chop to, you know, however they want. But yes, they can do it on a digital lesson from it. I have done it. I have actually, I mean, in reality, I prepared the lesson for a face-to-face lesson in the classroom. But this week, I have actually taught the digital lesson to one of my classes, and it worked fine. It worked fine.
Okay.
The interview part has to be readjusted, but it worked. They liked it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So as I mentioned, those materials will be available to anyone attending this. Would like to repeat that the attestato will be available on the Mondadori Education website, www.mondadorieducation.it/attestati, and give them a week, maybe even less than a week, but it could take a couple days to get it out. And the last thing I'd like to mention before we finish here this afternoon is that we'll also be having 2 more events next week. The first one is with my colleague from Macmillan, Teresa Doguelli. She is a teacher trainer extraordinaire in Turkey. and she'll be joining us at 4 p.m. on the 31st of March, which is a Tuesday, from 4 to 5 p.m., exactly like today. And then our final live streaming event will be with Richard Twigg, who was a longtime academic director at International House. He'll be speaking on Thursday on lexical grammar. He'll be speaking at 4:30 p.m., not 4 p.m. Richard will be speaking at 4:30 p.m., and that will last an hour as well. So 4:30 to 5 next Thursday. So you've got two more opportunities for training on Tuesday at 4 p.m. and on Thursday at 4:30 p.m. So I'd just like to take one last opportunity to thank Josefina and thank everybody who attended. And I hope to see you next week. And I hope you all stay safe and wash your hands. Thank you and have a great one.